Frisco, The Secret History, a podcast. Hi, this is Knox Bronson at the Secret History of Frisco podcast, and we have a really great episode for you today. We're talking to Rachel Walther, who is very involved in the noir community of film and history. Rachel, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. You want to just tell us a little bit about your background and your book you have coming out and stuff like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've been a sort of an obsessive movie watcher for most of my life, and currently I write pretty regularly for the Film Noir Foundation's magazine, Noir City, about film noir movies from the classic period as well as more contemporary films. And for the better part of the last few years, I've been working on a book tracing the history of Dog Day Afternoon, both the making of the film and the crazy true life, true crime story that inspired it. And so that's due out from Head Press, a UK publisher, next spring. And it's called Born to Lose: The Misfits Who Made Dog Day Afternoon. So I'm just starting to sort of ramp up working with publishers to promote that book and also to celebrate its 50th anniversary.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So I thought we would start talking about, San Francisco is home to about, I don't know, would it be 2 decades of movies or more that were noir set in San Francisco? Or?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's from the early, I think since the sound era, really, San Francisco's always had a particular place in film, and then especially after the war, they started shooting on location there fairly regularly. I think sort of to a disproportionate degree in the sense of, based on its population, there was New York, LA, and then just a ton of movies in San Francisco. And it also did have a resurgence, I'd say it's 70s and the 90s, Dirty Harry, things like that. It keeps cropping up as a great location for crime films.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were going to talk about perhaps the Maltese Falcon, the 1931 version and the 1941.
Yeah, I mean, everyone thinks of course, like the 41 version. Some folks consider it one of the first films to kind of usher in the film noir era. Other folks sort of say, no, it's proto-noir. It's really before that genre, the movement got going. But sort of however way you look at it, it really brought the detective story into the streets, into the here and now of contemporary life. And it's a story that's really inseparable from the city. And so it's sort of its own character, I'd say, as it's part of the story. But I know they did do an earlier version, right after the novel, shortly after the novel was published in 1931. Not nearly as many folks have seen that, but as it's become more widely available, home video and streaming, I think there's reasons to appreciate it on its own merits. Mm-hmm. If you compare it against the film directed by John Huston starring Humphrey Bogart, it's going to be hard to compare. But I think there's a lot of aspects that give it its own character. What struck you about it when you saw it?
The early one?
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, before we were recording, I mean, Humphrey Bogart is Sam Spade. So this other guy he was more of a joker.
Ricardo Cortez. Yeah, I love him. Yeah. I love that actor, and I think he was really good at playing those types of cads.
Mm-hmm. I should mention, by the time this episode appears, you can go to thesecrethistoryoffrisco.com and watch the early version.
Oh, very nice.
I have it up there.
Yeah.
So, I downloaded it. But it was just so different. It didn't have Peter Lorre. It didn't have Sidney Greenstreet. The the story seemed a little different, and I think even the heroine's name was, I thought it was Bridget O'Shaughnessy.
It's a weird thing they do in the story and in the 41 version. She first shows up and gives an alias, Ruth Wonderly. Then, as the story gets going, she admits her real name is Bridget O'Shaughnessy. And I suspect for the 31 version, they just didn't want to give audiences that confusion, so they just kept Ruth Wonderly through the whole film.
Yeah. Well, also, it seemed it was mostly shot in the interior.
Yeah.
And not out on the, not much of the San Francisco atmosphere.
It's very studio bound. Yeah, I think there's a little sequence that in like a back lot where they try to pass it off as Chinatown adjacent.
Was it shot in San Francisco?
No.
Oh no?
No. It was very. I mean, it was 31, so it was pretty studio bound. I think also out of practicality because I think it was still the era where they had to have microphones sort of placed around the set to pick it up, and so not a lot of movies from that era went out and about. But it's still trying to think. There's a couple of moments, I think, when Ricardo Cortez is Sam Spade, when he's talking to a bystander and he speaks Chinese to him, trying to say, oh, hey, what did you see? Little aspects of that. Try to stamp it in sort of the older part of the city, but it sort of does what it can. And there's a couple of stock establishing shots, but that's about it.
That was a cool moment. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and that made me think, to jump ahead a bit, in Lady from Shanghai, Rita Hayworth too, since she's from that, since she was either lived in that part of the world for a while or her character was from there. When there's a sequence where she's trying to find Orson Welles' character in Chinatown, she's talking to all the local merchants, trying to figure out where he's hiding out, and so it's a nice connection that gives the city, reminds you that the city has a very international feel to it, maybe compared to some other towns they might have chosen.
Well, when did they start shooting films in San Francisco?
Oh gosh, I mean, mostly after the war. I think
After
a lot
World War II?
for practical reasons. I mean, again, I'm sure someone might correct me with that, but it's just cameras became lighter, easier to use, easier to shoot, and a lot of filmmakers really wanted to get out of the studios. I think they were inspired a little, by the neo-realists that were those films that were coming over from Italy, that a lot of folks caught up with after the war, and I think, as you mentioned before we were talking, there was a huge boom in population from servicemen that passed through the city. So a lot of folks became more familiar with the town, and a lot of folks, I think, maybe they didn't live there, but they had a good association or a good memory of it. It's sort of like a party city like New Orleans. And the city's just so cinematic, and it's kind of hard to recreate in the studio, too, like all these weird natural Dutch angles that the city offers, and no matter where you shoot, you're going to get something gorgeous in the background, either a long, wild street that curves down and then back up, or Coit Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge. And so it was really just a director and a cinematographer's dream to do setups there. And there's a lot of, I think, particularly to noir, the idea of having empty streets, shadows, fog is way easier to plausibly contained within something that's considered realistic than, say, New York or LA, where it's just this smash of people, smash of urban sprawl. San Francisco still has those nooks and crannies, and it's very neighborhoody, so you could establish yourself there and shoot something really interesting.
Well, in the 30s, there were like three distinct groups that were running the city. It was in North Beach was the small element of the Italian mafia, the Lanza crime family, and they ran a lot of traditional organized crime stuff, and also owned half of Fisherman's Wharf.
Oh, okay.
The other half of Fisherman's Wharf was owned by a guy named a Sicilian by the name of Aliotto, whose son later became the mayor of San Francisco.
I was going to say, that name rang a bell.
And then there were the McDonough brothers, who were bail bondsmen, and they basically had a network with police and prosecutors and organized crime, vice, I should say. And you could not open a gambling house or a house of prostitution without their permission, and also massive kickbacks to them as well.
Yeah.
But on top of that, you had the police that basically ran everything, or in charge of everything, and they took kickbacks from everybody. And in 1937, there was, they took in about $1 million, which is about $30 million dollars today.
Wow.
And the population was only 645,000 at the time. So,
how did the war affect those rackets or industries, whatever you'd want to say?
This is actually at the end of the 30s. There was what was known as the Atherton Report.
Oh, okay.
And that kind of busted that all up. And then a guy named Bones Remmer came to town in the early 40s. He was a mob guy from the Calneva Lodge, and he came to San Francisco, and he was already running the gambling in San Francisco and the town of Emeryville, stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So it really much more opened it up to the actual mafia at that point in San Francisco. But anyway, I'm trying to remember. That stuff didn't seem that I've seen, and I'm not, maybe you've seen more of it reflected in the movies.
Honestly, no. I think really the 30s in San Francisco is a really untapped well of stories. Or it's in the film noir era. It's very much about fictional tales, time and place, not so much historical. This is what happened. It happened here. Say in the same way that New York had a lot of stories come out.
In the 30s, were there any movies shot in San Francisco, or were they just set in San Francisco? Inspired by San Francisco.
And a lot of them were still harkening back to the Barbary Coast lore, like the Frisco Kid, which, funny enough, Ricardo Cortez is in that, starring James Cagney, Barbary Coast. My brain is telling me Edward G. Robinson's in that, but I could be wrong. It was really that. You get the vision of the player piano and the big mustache. It's very, or like, say, Gentleman Jim with Errol Flynn. It was really the era of wooden sidewalks, lots of mud, the vision of San Francisco as a city coming up, and then the earthquake was really that. And it wasn't, but then, after the war, that's really when you started to see the dynamic city and all of its layers of history and contemporary life
What was the
depicted.
Second Maltese Falcon shot in San Francisco?
They did a couple exterior shots, but I want to say I think a lot of that second unit. I'm trying to remember the scenes where it's Bogart out and about. Maybe one or two, but again, mostly they do a second unit shot of the city and then the players in the studio. So it's still very studio bound. And I think that's one of the things that ties the two versions together is, to me, I think of the Maltese Falcon as maybe more of a proto-noir because it's still very airless. There's a lot of folks talking in rooms. And there's that stuffy quality to it, which I think adds to the tension because it's all about trying to get to people's real motivations and who's telling the truth, what's going on. But the action's more determined by people's motivations than, say, chases or chase sequences or, there's not a lot of... all the action is dialogue-driven rather than shot on location. But it's more evocative of the city for sure. They do show a bit more.
When was the Frisco Kid made?
36, I think.
Okay, so there's a number of movies from the 30s.
Yeah, it didn't really become a hot spot of interest, I'd say, and I can imagine a lot of that was maybe driven by the war, and so a lot of folks came into the city and saw everything it had to offer, and more independent productions wanted to, started to get underway. So they do the shooting and then work under a larger studio to get it distributed. Like, say, Woman on the Run was an independent production made in 49, put out in 1950, with starring Ann Sheridan and Dennis O'Keefe. And that is virtually, I think that's all shot on location in San Francisco. And that's literally, as the name suggests, it's Ann Sheridan running around town, or maybe sauntering around town is a better way to put it.
What year was that?
49, 50.
Oh, okay.
And although ironically, the big sort of finale set piece that's supposed to take place at Playland, they shot it in Long Beach. For a number of reasons, I think it just worked out better if they did it in Long Beach, but they still feature Laughing Sal as a main character that they can sort of hear throughout the final sequence, but there were two Sals, so that kind of doubled nicely. But yeah, it's in it. And so I think it's an era that you've alluded to in some of your previous shows right around 53 when the city shut down.
Yeah.
You actually have more visual evidence of San Francisco at that time in noir films. It's like a city sort of trying to wrestle with its lawless past under the confines of, syndicate-style corruption is still going on. A lot of people were disenfranchised after the war, trying to start their lives over again. And SF was just a really visually evocative place to throw characters and see what happens.
Right. So, who directed the 31 version?
It was Roy Del Ruth, who he's very much just sort of a journeyman Warner Brothers guy. He did a lot of Cagney films, comedies, dramas in equal measure. So I think that's one thing that, I think Roy Del Ruth's definitely a delightful director, but I don't really think anyone working on that 1931 production thought it was anything special. Mm-hmm. They were just adapting a straight-up detective story, maybe a little bit different. I personally think Ricardo Cortez really adds a dynamism to his depiction of Sam Spade that I think is actually more in keeping with Dashiell Hammett's version of him. In the book, he's a real louse for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a line, something like when he smiled, it was all V's, and he compares him to Satan, and Cortez really just relished playing those sort of good bad guys. And I think in Bogart's version, he maybe gives him too much heart. Not to knock it in that way, but what I mean to say is his depiction transcends the Spade on the page into something that really works well for the film and is iconic. But Cortez has got a zing to him, just if I haven't already plugged it enough.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where a lot of the difference comes in, was because with the 41 version that we all know much better, it was John Huston's it was his debut directorial feature, and so he was really trying hard. He really wanted to make this special.
I didn't realize that was his first movie.
Yeah, I think he'd done second unit stuff, and he was a Hollywood kid. His father, Walter Huston, was a huge star in the 30s, and continued to be. They worked together on Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and so Walter Huston was an icon, not as well known today as he was then, but and John Huston and Bogart, I think, already had a rapport, so that helped. They had a prior relationship, and it's just one of those situations where everything coalesced into making it a special film. It was still low budget. I don't think Warner Brothers was trying to make it quite like the prestige A picture it's ended up becoming in our minds. And Mary Astor was a great actress that had been around. She could just as easily, I think, have starred in the 31 version. I think she was with a different studio back in those days, but she had a great career in the early 30s in Hollywood that was a bit tarnished by scandal in the late 30s. So by the time the 41 Falcon came around, she was kind of the perfect mix of a great lady that we were familiar with, but maybe she was capable of certain things sort of off color that we weren't aware of.
Was there any particular story behind the remake, that why they decided to do it, or was?
I think Warner Brothers owned the rights still. It was still a property that they had, and I think John Huston was looking for a project. It wasn't going to cost them any extra money to bring it out. And again, please, if anyone knows more details than that, correct me. But it was easy, honestly, and I think it was a story that appealed to them. Because of all those different things. It was a way for sort of John Huston to really show that he could make a film that was a bit darker, a bit more intense. And
Are there any other Dashiell Hammett stories that have been made into movies?
Yeah. I'm trying. The Glass Key, which was his last novel, he did it after Maltese Falcon. That, I'm blanking on the year. It's a very studio-bound movie, but that was like an Alan Ladd, Veronica Lake vehicle, and Brian Donlevy's the third player, big player in that, and that it's a bit of a convoluted plot. It's it's a political. It's more of a political thriller, and it does have crime elements to it. So it's it's totally thrown into this noir conversation. But it's, say for instance, if you're trying to choose between This Gun for Hire or one of the other films, I would maybe go with that. Glass Keys, for me, it's a little stuffy also. And another novel that he made, Red Harvest, that's been adapted in a lot of really creative ways, even because it's the story of this guy that's sort of playing two, I'm trying to think about just two sort of crime entities against each other. So
that wasn't San Francisco, was it? I thought it was a small town somewhere.
It is. It's I'm spacing on exactly, and I'll know it right after the. So that's everything from Fistful of Dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Is a version of Red Harvest, and then oh my gosh, there was a version with Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis is Red Harvest.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They also did do. I remember clearly. Oh, I'm trying to remember the year. I want to say maybe 2013, 2014, at the Film Noir Festival in San Francisco. There was a full day of Hammett adaptations, and he began the day with Red Harvest, which was a film he literally, when he came out on stage, he's like, I haven't even seen this movie. We found this print. We're going to show it. We don't know what to expect. It has barely anything to do with the story. It was sort of an odd mix of crime and vaudeville. Jimmy Durante's in it at one point. That's the extent of the memory I have about the film. So it keeps cropping up, but rarely is it a straightforward version. Oh, another plug. Mid to late 90s, Yojimbo, the Kurosawa film.
Yes.
And so Fresh is, I think, more of a remake of Yojimbo. But it's that same thing. So Red Harvest, whether Hammett gets credit or not, that's a story that comes up again and again. But Fresh is that tale placed in, I want to say, either Brooklyn or the Bronx, where it's a young drug runner in his teens playing off against two rival drug gangs in sort of the inner city setting. And that's a great movie. Samuel L. Jackson co-stars.
Let's talk about the Film Noir Foundation.
Fantastic!
It was founded in San Francisco.
Yes.
Eddie Muller is a San Franciscan.
Yeah.
And
then you knew his father.
I did. I worked with him in the 70s in the San Francisco Examiner.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Yes.
Eddie's father was a prominent boxing journalist in the city from the 50s into several decades, and so Eddie's a Bay Area native.
And they have a magazine.
Yes.
And is it a monthly, quarterly, or
quarterly?
Quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
And you write for it.
Yes, the Noir City, and so that's something folks can get it. Either definitely encourage people if they're interested. Check out the Film Noir Foundation. There are nonprofits, and they funnel all their contributions into restoring films. There's a very good example. A couple, Woman on the Run, that I mentioned was that was a film that was it was a public domain film, so you could not watch it clearly. You couldn't find a good print. Film Noir Foundation restored it, and now it's gorgeous. The Man Who Cheated Himself, another film from that same year, shot in and around the city with a great sort of set piece at the end at Fort Point. That was restored by the Film Noir Foundation.
Are those movies?
It's 4950.
Oh, okay. So sort of the golden era of noir was in the late 40s, you would say, early 50s in San Francisco?
Yeah, definitely. It's with the Film Noir Foundation, if you contribute to them, you get a free subscription to a digital version of the magazine that you can pull on a PDF or a tablet, and or through Amazon you can get print-on-demand copies. So you can read an actual physical copy, which is such a great way to. And it's got, Imogen Sarah Smith now is the editor-in-chief. She's based in New York and is a regular contributor to the Criterion Collection. So she's running things. She also writes for the magazine a decent bit, as do I. So it's a great roster of folks.
Well, back to San Francisco. Thank you. I'll put all this stuff in the show notes as well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
But you don't think it really came to life until the 40s?
That's right. Yeah, I think it's, like I said, it was shooting on location was very uncommon in the 30s for just a number of practical reasons. Also just so that studios could maintain control of their players, and it was also much more of a, particularly for, say, like Warner Brothers and MGM, it's a factory atmosphere where you show up to the studio, you get your call sheet for the day. So, for instance, like Humphrey Bogart was a player at Warner Brothers. I think in 1939 he made like 12 movies. So it's just a grind. You're showing up early, you're just running from picture to picture, and the notion of the auteur going out into the city and having a vision and shooting it is something that folks like Orson Welles started to sort of chink into that armor a bit and work on to various degrees of success. And so he's done one of the best examples of San Francisco noir, but it wasn't...
Orson Welles?
Yeah, The Lady from Shanghai.
I want to do an episode on that movie. I mean, at some point.
Oh, there's so much there. Even the whole saga of the film's making before they get to San Francisco is its own movie, I think. Yeah.
I think that was the first, when I first started researching noir movies set in San Francisco, because I thought this would be a great way to help further bring the last era of the Wild Wild West, which San Francisco was in the 30s and 40s, would be through talking about the movies.
Yeah.
And that was the one I found and watched. So that was Orson Welles.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, and he'd been sort of out of Hollywood for a bit when he made that. He had a huge success with Citizen Kane, and then such a bad experience making Magnificent Ambersons, his follow-up, which was really sort of like this mangled masterpiece. That the sort of the cliche with Wells was that he'd make this great film, but it was over budget, over time. Mm-hmm. They'd take it away from him, re-edit it, and so parts of his vision glimmered through. But
are there any stories about the 41 Maltese Falcon that stick in your mind?
As far as anecdotes or trivia, I hate to say it, but not really. One interesting thing was that this was Sidney Greenstreet's first film. He was a stage actor, and he'd never really gone to Hollywood and done anything, and so he was really nervous. Mm-hmm. And he was like holding on to Mary Astor's hand during those first few scenes, and he was sweating and shaking and just sort of trying to get into that setting, which is so intimate compared to the stage. But obviously, when you watch the film, there's no indication that he's feeling that inside. His character has such a commanding presence. And I think that that's really helped with the camera work. So many shots of his character, Caspar Gutman, in the film are from below, which just makes him sort of extra large, extra foreboding. And I think just the breezy casualness that he brings to that role. I mean, so different than the 31 film.
Yes.
Dudley Diggs plays him in the original, and he does his own thing, but he's much more cartoonish. And I think Sidney Greenstreet really keeps Caspar Gutman from being a cartoon, which is sort of hard to do based on the way the character's written. And he played off Peter Lorre's character so well that they turned that into sort of a franchise. They were partnered, I think, like 5 or 6 more times.
Oh, what were some of the movies?
There was an interesting follow-up to the Maltese Falcon, Across the Pacific, which was sort of a bit of a reunion. It's got Humphrey Bogart, Mary Astor, Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and it's just a World War II spy thriller. But
what's that called again?
Across the Pacific. And they play very similar characters in it. There's background to Danger, which I can't quite remember the plot. There's a very interesting movie, Three Strangers. I think Geraldine Fitzgerald is the third stranger. It's 3 people, I think, come together and sort of descend on a winning lottery ticket, and it destroys their lives. Oh gosh, there's a Victorian one I'm trying to remember the name of.
These are not set in San Francisco in particular, no.
I'm trying to remember. There may be a scene or two in Across the Pacific because, again, it's wartime. They jump around a lot, though, I know. It's mostly on sets and on the boat. A boat, I should say.
I'm out of questions.
I'm trying to think of to slot it in. One fun cameo in the Maltese Falcon is there's a character that sort of 3/4 of the way through the film storms into Sam Spade's office and mutters Maltese Falcon and collapses dead with the package that does prove to be the Falcon itself. That's Walter Huston, John Huston's dad. So there's a nice little cameo in there.
How successful were each of the movies?
31, I don't think did too much. It was just another... I don't know the numbers per se, but it's just sort of, just another movie, often done. But the 41 version did really well. And it was one of the first times that Bogart had starred in a film rather than playing the heavy. And it really galvanized the public's interest in seeing him more. And so from there, it was a pretty quick jump to Casablanca and other films that really made his name. It was just the year before High Sierra was really his first starring role. And so that film and The Falcon, you have to give George Raff credit with making Humphrey Bogart's career. He turned down High Sierra, he turned down Maltese Falcon, and he turned down Casablanca. So Bogart really made a meal out of those rejects.
Wow.
But it is funny to think of a time when Raft was a bigger star than Bogart.
It's hard to, it's hard to wrap my head around that because who did the music for the 41? Do you know?
Yeah, it was, oh gosh, I actually have his name written down because he's not, and I think, I gotta say, Adolf Deutsch.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is another thing that really makes that film as rich and dynamic as it is. The 31 film has, I don't think, any music aside from things coming incidental from the rooms. But the 41 film, it adds such gravitas to the scenes, especially the scenes towards the end when he's confronting Bridget O'Shaughnessy and they're having their big blowout at the end about him turning her in. The music just ratchets everything up. I mean, in the early to mid 40s, I think sometimes they go way too crazy with the music, and it's just this character that's kind of shrieking in the background. Something like Humoresque with Joan Crawford is a good example of that. But I think for some movies it really helps, and it adds a dynamism to a movie that I think, as I mentioned, is otherwise a bit airless and kind of claustrophobic. So the movie helps things along, the music helps things along.
Well, let's talk about Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall in Dark Passage.
Oh, yes. Yes. That was a project based on a Dave Goodis novel, who's done a lot of other, most of his stories are crime noir based. Shoot the Piano Player. And I think that's a film that is, I suspect San Francisco was really chosen out of necessity because of its proximity to San Quentin. And so the plot is Bogart is in San Quentin, he's been convicted of murder, and he escapes. And so what's really unique about that film is the first 45 minutes or so are all shot first person. You don't see Bogart, you see things from his perspective as he's escaping, and this mysterious woman somehow tracks him down when he's on the run and says, "Come with me, get in my car, you're safe." And so he goes to her lovely apartment in San Francisco and is hiding out. And he gets plastic surgery to change his appearance to sort of help him in his escape. So it's not until after the bandages come off that we see it's now Humphrey Bogart, and the action goes on from there. But the city, again, it's that the verticality of the city, I think, really plays a huge role, because there's so many scenes where Bogart's hiding in Bacall's apartment. He sees things down at the street. You know, there's a suspicious guy kind of looking around his car, that sort of thing. He's always sort of... you can see so much at a glance when you're in San Francisco, but it's also a small enough city where if you jump into a cab, the cab driver kind of recognizes you from the paper. He sort of says, "Oh, hey, what's your deal?" Tom DeAndre's the cab driver in that film, and he's got this great little role. So it's still a town that shows in a lot of ways that it's still very neighborhoody compared to, say, New York, where the whole point is getting one of a million faces.
So I think I saw that movie a long time ago, and I just remember the bandages coming up. That's all I remember. I forget, did they know each other?
Yes. By that point, they were married, so that was...
No, I know that part. I meant in the movie.
Yeah, the...
What's the story behind her rescuing him? He escapes from San Quentin.
Yes. It's a little contrived. I think the idea is that her father, in the film, Bacall's character's father, was convicted, and then I believe either he was executed or died in prison. But he was wrongly convicted. He didn't do the murder. So she always has a sympathy for wrongly prosecuted men. Although ironically, she also just happens to have a connection to folks that Bogart's character knows in the city that then factor into the plot, and who may have actually killed his wife, who he was accused of murdering. So it's definitely like a bit of movie magic going on, that she's not just some random lady that doesn't have anything to do with the plot, but it does tie in nicely. So that's, I think, why through the most of the film you really wonder what her true motivations are, because the story that she gives Bogart seems a little too pat, a little too good to be true, but you have to sort of see how it all plays out.
Do you recommend the movie?
Oh my goodness, it's definitely one of the. It's a great film on a lot of levels. because it's also very sweet how Bogart and Bacall are together. I mean, they obviously made a big deal of the fact that they were newly married in real life, but they just have this back and forth snappy patter, this repartee between them that it wasn't mushy, it wasn't sentimental, it was really just sort of more of a meeting of the minds than anything that was too gooey. And I think that's why they're sort of like a great noir couple. Key Largo is another sort of crime-based film that they were in together, and then Big Sleep around the same time.
Was Dark Passage fairly successful?
Yes, it was.
They were both big stars by then.
Yeah, I mean, Bacall...
What year is that, 47?
47, so it was just a few years earlier that they met, and Bacall was, 19, I want to say.
Yes.
So they made a huge deal of that he was about 20 years older and still married at the time, so there was a little bit of that going on, but by the time Dark Passage was out, everything was legal, they were married. And then, I mean, Bacall's career definitely ended up taking a back seat to Bogart's during the history of their marriage, because she had a son and a daughter, and definitely wanted to stay home with them during their early years. And it was honestly not until after he passed away in 57 that she started to build back up her roles.
A little off topic, but did you see the Sopranos episode where Tony Soprano's nephew robs Lauren Bacall's swag?
So great, yes. The swag bag.
The swag.
Mm-hmm. She has such a great sense of humor. Oh my gosh, yeah. No, Bacall is just always elegant from day one.
Yes.
For her entire life. She was really a star unlike any other.
So just back to Dark Passage for a moment. Are there a lot of location shots? I mean, is there... There
are. I mean, I apologize. I'm not great with remembering addresses. And so I know, you can visit the apartment building where they shot the film. I mean, it's a mix. They show the establishing shot in the city, and then they've got to go to a studio. But so there's also great stuff down by Fort Point, right at the bridge. Yeah. And it's all based in sort of your San Francisco, that classic Nob Hill, Russian Hill, everything around Chinatown, sort of up to the bridge. It stays out of the avenues or south of Market. It's all that classic San Francisco that we remember. And Golden Gate Bridge, it's just such a... I think I'm trying to remember who I'm quoting this from. It's not an original sentiment that, outside of the Eiffel Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge is one of the most iconic locators. And so many folks wanted to put that in as an icon.
Well, I'm going to have to track it down and watch it. It sounds great. One last thing before we go. Do you want to talk about noir movies in general? Because my own experience with a lot of noir movies is everybody is rather distasteful. Not nice people.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Yeah.
I mean, the Maltese Falcon, Sam Spade's kind of a hero, so you kind of like him.
Yeah.
But there are other movies that are just everybody's on the make, and I mean, is that kind of...
Yeah, when Spade's a good... I think I'm ripping this off from Eddie Muller. I think he said that Sam Spade was sort of the first anti-hero, and I think that really does go to the heart of when you're either trying to play the game of what's film noir and what isn't, or just in general trying to get your sense of what this world is it's also stories that you end up liking folks you wouldn't normally like otherwise. If you're reading, say, a news account or something a bit more straight, people in illicit industries, but based on the way the story's told, he's the guy you're going for, he's the guy you're rooting for, and sometimes it's Law and Order that are the ones that are really the bad guys. But no, I mean, noir, it developed for a lot of practical reasons. Especially as the war was brewing in Europe in the mid-30s, a lot of European filmmakers, Germans particularly, either came over for their own reasons or were fleeing persecution during the war. So Hollywood, during World War II and afterwards, had a huge influx of emigre artists, directors, cinematographers, actors, and they brought still German expressionist style that was a holdover from the silent era, and just the experience that everyone had been through during the war, even straight up detective stories and things that were around since the 1930s and earlier, just made much more sense. Everything had more darkness, depth, and meaning to it after this sort of harrowing ordeal. And even in straight movies, like say The Best Years of Our Lives, you know, Dana Andrews' character, he comes back from the war, his wife was cheating on him, he lost his job, there's sort of he comes back and things aren't what they were, or the happiness that he had sold himself on to get him through and to survive. You get home and no one cares anymore. You're another guy in a sea of faces. So noir really capitalized on that estrangement that folks were starting to have with the American dream. And also a lot of the practical things people had done to survive, either through illicit industries or just people's sense of morality, was shaken up by everything that they had gone through. And then you add in that dark expressionist style with a lot of crazy angles, all the dark shadows that we know about Venetian blinds, all those sorts of cliched things that are associated with noir. I mean, that's really definitely an arbiter. And some of that was also for practical reasons. Crime films were usually shot on a smaller budget than A pictures, and so shadows cover up a lot of set that you don't have money to decorate. So throw some darkness in, suddenly something looks super cool that would have been cheesy otherwise. And people were just sort of off to the races. I mean, I think there was just dozens. And by 1947, it was really taking over Hollywood, even influencing Westerns. Comedies had a darker tone to them. But noir wasn't... It was just sort of, what I'm trying to say is it wasn't defined as a genre. It didn't self-define itself as a movement. Just suddenly folks started making darker pictures. All these cool stars started cropping up in the genre. Like I mentioned, Alan Ladd, Veronica Lake. Yeah. And it was the French, of course, in the 50s that started writing about this as a movement and defining it, because I think they had enough objectivity to it. And it sort of reached a fever pitch by the mid to late 50s. And there's a number of reasons, I think, why that shifted. When television came in and a lot of studios were buying the rights to replay films on TV, it behooved them to actually shoot something in sort of a flat, sharp black and white gray style without all these huge shadows, because depending on someone's set, they might not be able to see anything of what was going on. So just out of a sensibility for longevity and to compete with television, film studios were trying to shoot in a flatter style and also just do things that were more Law and Order based to kind of compete with some of the programs that were going on. But still, I mean, noir, it's like once you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once that I think that sensibility came out into the world, there were always folks that sort of ran with that sensibility in a variety of ways. I mean, Orson Welles, again, like Lady from Shanghai is a big sort of mark on the tree ring of noir when he did that. But then also Touch of Evil, sort of the epoch of that era. It came out in 1958. And after that, there was sort of a fallow period into the late 60s. No, border town. So yeah, like just south of the border there. Okay. So yeah, that was definitely sort of the classic era in a nutshell. But I definitely argue that noir is sort of a state of mind at that point, and it became it started as a movement, and then I think after the mid 60s, it kind of became a genre in itself, because then folks who grew up watching those movies were making their films. And so rather than just sort of picking up what was in the air and trying to capture something that was a vibe, they were trying to recreate. It became more nostalgia got baked into it. So to various degrees, there's all these tree branches and offshoots of where that went, which is a whole podcast in and of itself.
Well, that is great. I never thought about it all that way.
Oh,
thank you for explaining.
Gosh, well, and I apologize. I hope I wasn't too vague, too. I mean, it's certainly something there's so much written about the topic that there's a lot of different ways to define it. So that's just sort of personally how I think about it.
Well, clearly we have more movies to talk about.
Oh, goodness, yes.
So I think we can say goodbye for now.
Yeah.
Thank you
so
much,
yes.
Rachel, for joining us. And I will, I check the show notes because I'm going to have links to Rachel's stuff and everything. So thanks again so much for coming, and until next time, Rachel.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, happy watching. I think hopefully we've talked about some stuff folks are going to want to check out.
I hope so. Yeah. I think so. Okay, thanks. The Secret History of Frisco is a listener-supported podcast. Main episodes will always be free. Our website is www.thesecrethistoryoffrisco.com. Please join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Frisco. Visit the website for show notes, references, and bibliographies. Please take advantage of our free membership tier on Patreon. Paid tier members starting at as little as $1 a month will receive ad-free and bonus episodes and other perks of membership. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends about it, especially those who enjoy San Francisco or true crime history. Word of mouth is the absolute best means of promotion for any creative endeavor in this world of algorithms and the ceaseless barrage of ads, notifications, and appeals on every digital platform. If you are aware of some particular aspect of San Francisco history in the 30s and 40s you would like me to research or have a story to tell, please get in touch with me. If you are an expert in some aspect of that same era and would like to share that expertise on the podcast, also please let me know. Once again, I'm your host, Knox Bronson. Thank you for listening. Until next time, please get a little crazy and call it Frisco.